the fuck is my cat doing? He's climbing my bookshelves. Please hold. Hey everybody, my name is Sam. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am coming at you guys with another sci-fi recommendations video. I've done two videos that are sci-fi recommendations for non-sci-fi readers. I will link them in the cards or the description or both. One of them was just a general recommendations video, and my last one was for historical fiction readers. And today I'm doing literary fiction. I've been reading a lot of books lately that are sci-fi based but have a much more literary feel and like vibe to them, and I've just been really in the right mood and mindset for that, and so now seems like a really good time to take on this genre and like give you guys some recommendations for some stuff that I've really been enjoying recently. So I have 4 recommendations that are from me, and then I've got a couple of recommendations that I'm going to put at the end of this video that are from some of my YouTube friends who also make sci-fi focused videos. The first recommendation I'm going to give you guys is something that I read back in July, and that is a book called Version Control by Dexter Palmer. I buddy read this with Janelle over at All the World's a Page, who is a lovely, wonderful human who also reads a lot of literary fiction, and buddy reading that with her was a really good experience, and if you like literary fiction, you should definitely check out Janelle's channel, which I'll link down below. But that's neither here nor there. I guess I should probably tell you about the book. So Version Control is a near future story that focuses on time travel and the effects that time travel has on this particular family, and you end up seeing 3 different like alternative timelines in the book. There's like one major difference in each of them, and it totally changes the trajectory of the whole story. I really liked certain things about this book. There were definitely some things that like weren't the most amazing, but overall I do think it was a worthwhile read. I really loved the approach that this book took to time travel. It was not an approach I had seen done in anything else, and it almost felt academic. It made it feel more realistic or like attainable, I guess, which I thought was really cool. This book was also a really, really solid exploration of what life is like after college and like what it has meant to grow up as a millennial. So basically what it's like to remember what life was like before the internet, but also be in a unique position where you still grew up with the internet and evolving technology, and sort of like having a different understanding of like how technology has changed social structure. It also addressed internet dating in a way that was apparently very realistic. I don't have any experience with online dating, but Janelle, who I buddy read this with, does, and she said it was spot on depiction of online dating, so that's kind of fun. Also, like, this is a sci-fi book in the strictest sense because the main elements that like drive the story are speculative elements. It's time travel and like the development of a device that allows you to travel through time, but it definitely focuses more on the relationships between the characters and the relationships that the characters have with the technology than it focuses on the technology itself. Some of the characters, I will say, are much, much better developed and like more fleshed out than others, and there were some tropes in this book that I wasn't totally crazy about. Like, there was a lot of girl hate, but I do think that this book would make a really nice bridge into sci-fi for people who are more accustomed to reading more like dramatic or character-based stories. That was really long-winded, so like, sorry about it. The second book that I'm going to recommend is one that I read this week, actually, this past week, and that is The Circle by Dave Eggers. Dave Eggers is a super literary writer. So right off the bat, like, his writing style is super, super literary and like kind of, I don't know if like flowery or poetic is the right way to say it, but it's just like really compulsively readable, but like not overly simplistic. I don't know if that made any sense, but like I really, really enjoy Dave Eggers' writing style. And most of his other books are literary fiction, so this is kind of an anomaly for him. He's not like a writer who does a ton of sci-fi. This book explores the power of technology in this current digital age and sort of the need for privacy and like the risks you take with tech companies that kind of keep developing products and keep getting more and more power within society at large. It's like a really surprisingly poignant look at the world we're living in right now. Like, I feel like this shit could happen next year. This book focuses more on like the societal effects of technology rather than the technical details. Like, you don't go into any of the kind of nitty-gritty of how the technology in this book works. It's more about like how it affects people. And I think that makes it a lot more palatable for somebody who doesn't read a lot of science fiction, because you're not learning a lot of terminology that you aren't familiar with. It takes place in the United States in like a current time frame, and it's just really super approachable and readable. I didn't give you guys a synopsis, but it's about a tech company that slowly starts to take over the world. It's really good. You should all read it. It's delightful. The next book that I have is Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. Margaret Atwood herself does not really consider her books to be science fiction, but they are definitely speculative in nature, and they like address potential scientific advancements. The fact that she doesn't really consider her books science fiction, I think does make them more approachable as like a bridge into sci-fi for somebody who's more used to reading literary fiction, because like that's kind of the approach that she's taking to it. This book is about a super drug, basically, that is meant to work like Viagra, and it actually causes infertility in people who take it and eventually spreads a disease that wipes out most of the population. And it's about the events leading up to that, which take place in flashbacks, but also like just kind of about what society turns into after that point. It's a lot. That book, it affected me a lot when I read it, but it's one of those books that like the longer it's sat with me, the more I've thought about it, and it just like really has a lot to say. It's about friendships gone bad and confusing and twisted romantic relationships, and what one person's ambition or dreams can do to like kind of really fuck up everybody around them. It's so good. I cannot stress enough how much I think people should read this book. Next, I have a short story recommendation, which is A Killer Plant Story. Is anyone surprised? But that is Rappaccini's Daughter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. It's just, I have this book of his short stories, but I think you can find it online for free if you want to read it. I'll see if I can find it online, and maybe I'll like link it in the description if you guys want to read it. But it's like a 20-page story. It'll take you very little time to read. This is a story about a young woman who tends her father's garden, which is filled with poisonous plants, and she eventually becomes poisonous herself. And it is the story of that young woman and the young man who falls in love with her, and it's just a tragic and horrible love story, and it is just, it's beautifully written, and it's not about the plants, it's about the people, which I think is like an important distinction for sci-fi that kind of has a more literary element to it. I fucking love that story. I read it in high school and it has stuck with me ever since. And next, we're going to move on to some suggestions that I got from some of my favorite sci-fi booktube creators. So I have one suggestion each from 3 channels, only one of which I have actually read, so I won't be able to chime in too much on most of these, but they are books that I intend to read, and I can at least give you like the briefest synopsis. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is the only one that I have read, and that is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. I finished this like 2 days ago. I read it in like a day. This book is beautiful. It is the story of a flu outbreak that wipes out most of the population, and the story of kind of like some of the people at the time of the outbreak, and also some people 20 years after, and them trying to survive in this like fucked up post-apocalyptic world. And there's a lot of references to art and literature and music in it, and it's like about a traveling symphony and theater troupe, and it's beautifully written, and it's just really well done. It's a sad story, but it has a hopeful ending, and it just like really, it was beautiful. This book was Megan from Tome Infinity's suggestion for this video, so check her out if you haven't. The next suggestion I have is the suggestion from Megan and Sue at Spinebreakers, and nobody is going to be surprised that they have suggested an Octavia Butler book, and this is Parable of the Sower, which is the first in a duology, the Earthseed series. And this is about a young woman living in the 2020s, I believe, in a society that has been overrun with climate change and corporate greed. And she ends up developing this new kind of religion belief system, and she tries to rebuild society based on those values. I haven't read this yet. It's actually on my immediate TBR, partly because I just am trying to work my way through all of Octavia Butler's books, and also partly because there is a graphic novel adaptation of it coming out very soon that I have a NetGalley arc for, and I'm really excited about it. And then finally, I have a suggestion from Scott at Book Invasion, and his suggestion for this was The Dogstars by Peter Heller. This is a post-apocalyptic story about a man who is living in an airplane hangar with his dog and an angry gunman. Scott said this is a really good book and it's written in a really literary way, but you should approach it with the caveat that the author doesn't use quotation marks, so it might take some getting used to. I had not actually heard of this book until I asked them for suggestions, but it sounds really interesting and I would like to get to it soon. So those are my suggestions for sci-fi books for people who are literary fiction readers. Let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions that would fit into this category or what genre you want me to approach next. Have a great day, guys. Bye.